The Boldly Now Show. Burning desire. Big ideas. Bold action.
Welcome to the Boldly Now Show. This is Michael Sean Conaway, and I have the great pleasure of speaking with Amanda Ravenhill today. Amanda is the Executive Director of the Buckminster Fuller Institute and the co-founder and founding Executive Director of Project Drawdown. Amanda, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me here.
Amanda, you've been working in very specific issues around systems design, systems thinking, climate change obviously being a big focus with Project Drawdown. What has happened for you over the past 3 to 4 months as we've gone from, the old normal life into pandemic and then into grappling with systemic racism and the rise of the social movement around Black Lives Matter? What's happened for you? What's changing for you? How's your world perspective changed? And what are the things you're up to right now?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One of the main things that has come to me is just the intersection between climate justice, environmentalism, and social justice, that it's the frontline communities that are often the historically oppressed and marginalized people of color that are going to be hit first and worst by environmental degradation and climate change and extreme weather. And, I grew up kind of in international development. My parents are anthropologists and aid workers, and went into that realm kind of through the poverty alleviation and women's empowerment realm. And then I was living in Bolivia, and these 1,000-year weather events kept on happening. And, weather events that are only supposed to happen every 1,000 years. And I realized just kind of like the intersection of those two. So when I was working in Bolivia, where I went to high school, I moved back after doing an undergrad degree in international development. I was doing fair trade handicraft exporting, and it was really beautiful. 25% of Bolivians consider themselves artisans, and we're working in this developmental way where it's really increasing the potential of the people in the communities, and it's building up their economic foundation. And these 1,000-year weather events kept on happening, where these floods and droughts were happening that are only supposed to happen every 1,000 years. And literally the foundation of some of the homes of some of the women that I was working with got swept away. And I realized that there's this climate change multiplier that, in the complex algorithm of change, of all the things that we need to do in order to make the world work for 100% of life, there's like this outside multiplier effect. If we don't deal with climate change, all that gets washed away, quite literally. And actually through my work since, I dedicated myself to climate change solutions and looking at soil health, agroforestry, all these solutions that we identified with Project Drawdown, family planning, girls' education. Actually, if you deal with climate change well, all those other things can become easier. So the multiplier effect goes both ways.
Yeah, and so here we are in a time where, we wanted to avoid this time. I think 5-10 years ago, we're like, how could we avoid going off the edge of the cliff? And here we are kind of dangling off the edge of the cliff. And many lives, or many more lives, are now being directly impacted by these forces, along with the multiplier effect of climate change, as you say. What's the thing right now that you're most confronted by? What are you in this moment, grappling with, maybe in a way you haven't done before?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think one thing that the movement for Black Lives has put a magnifying glass over is the radical wealth inequality in the US and the world, and specifically in San Francisco, where I spend most of my time. It is just disgusting, really. The gap between people and the cycles of oppression and institutionalized racism and state-sponsored violence, and so much that keeps people of color without access and resources to that which the rich, who just keep on getting richer, have. And if you look at, there's a great book called The Finer Future by Hunter Levins and John Fullerton. They look at past civilization collapses, and almost all of them have two things in common. one, we didn't respect our natural resources, and two, radical wealth inequality happened right before collapse. And yeah, we know that our ecosystems are in a really fragile state. We just hit 100 degrees in Siberia this week.
Mm.
We
And
should have paid attention when it got to 80, because the average should have been, you know, just 59 as the high. But for whatever reason, the 3 digits got our attention, burst through the news cycle. And here we are. And I think, you know, those who are hit first and worst being those who have also been, you know, right at the, just squashed down by all the cycles of poverty and oppression and marginalization. Yeah, it just really gets me. And the potential of someone who does have all of this wealth to sign on to the Giving Pledge or something even more extreme, just to spend down their money. I mean, it's like you're trying to save it for your grandchildren. Like, your grandchildren want a world, not your wealth. Like, there isn't going to be much left if they don't spend down. So it's at once really challenging me, and also an opportunity for us to, you know, be the regeneration, everyone who's alive today being this omni generation of people who get to put practices in place that bring us back to life.
Okay, so a little thought experiment with me. You kind of already foreshadowed this, but let's go 20 years in the future. Radical wealth disparity continues to increase, and we continue to, at best, be ineffective in dealing with climate change. You know, what does the world look like in 20 years after that?
I mean, in 20 years, we could probably hit something like 6 or 7 degrees, you know, temperature rise above average levels, above pre-industrial levels. That makes it look like, if you look in this map behind me, just like the very tips of the bottom and the part of this map are inhabitable. So we would have to move, you know, billions and billions of people around the world, terraform those places so that they could grow agriculture, grow crops. And in the process, we would probably have a lot of conflict. And already what we have of this like bunker mentality of the people who do have wealth saying, oh, I'm going to just like stash my cash and like put it over here and take care of myself. It's like, no one will be truly happy until no one is suffering. And for sure, like, your bunker won't work if there's a full on global, you know, war induced by all of the economic collapse that will arise from all the ecosystem collapse. So seems like it's straight out of a dystopian model or movie.
Yeah, well, and it seems like the natural conclusion of the win-win game, right? Like, one person left alive with every bit of wealth and resources in a dead planet, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, like conqueror over nothing at that point.
Right. And are they even human anymore? Because isn't it human to be in interaction with nature and with this living superorganism of which we're integral parts of? You know, they're like almost non-human anymore.
Yeah, and we've exchanged a living, thriving planet for this abstract notion called wealth. But wealth doesn't really work if there's nobody to exchange it with. There's no, like, money has no value unless we have somebody to exchange it with. And if we kind of, you know, in 20 years, we might not see the demise of the whole species, but it might not be something you'd really want to live in.
No.
So now let's think about, you know, like that there are a lot of good forces out there, and, you know, like, there are people working on climate change. There's certainly a big conversation around change wealth disparity. What if we make incremental change? What if we get a little bit better? You know, what does that 20-year timeline look like?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a little bit better looks like, you know, continued extreme weather and all of the subsequent insecurities that happen from there. You know, time is so of the essence. It's like incremental change will still kind of lead us to a potential collapse. There's so many ecosystems that are right on the edge, like the Amazon, you know, which is not only the lungs of our planet, but as I learned from Atosa Sultani, who runs the Headwaters Initiative, which is part of what's being featured on Global Unity Week here. The Amazon is also the heart of the planet. It cycles so much water. You know, the river, the atmospheric river skies, sky rivers above it cycle 5 times more water than the Amazon River below it. And so we're at a point of, you know, and especially with COVID now killing a lot of the indigenous elders, we're so on the edge. I don't think incremental change is actually going to be too much different than worst case scenario.
So even if we just do good, it's not likely to be enough.
The window of opportunity is just like closing and closing and closing and closing. And like, we're already at a point where we have to like, you know, like a spaceship in a sci-fi movie, have to like go sideways in order to get through it. And we're like barely gonna make it with everything that we're putting in right now.
So it seems then that you know, the next question we're going to kind of try to paint a picture is, what if we do everything right, like we really just nail everything, and we move humanity, not just the climate or, you know, wealth disparity, in the right direction. We move all of humanity in a direction that's towards a thriving for humanity, or 100% of life, as you just mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to say, it just seems like already in the conversation we said, look, we can't get there by doing things the way we're doing now. We actually have to give up
Mm-hmm.
the old way of doing things, or the old systems, or kind of our old notions of what life is like on the planet. Paint a picture first of like, what does it look like to get there in 20 years? What have we managed to accomplish to take ourselves towards thriving if we do everything right? And then kind of work your way back to me, like, what's some of the like the now things that really need to happen in your view to point us in that direction?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I mean, speaking of the drawdown, and the image behind me is this, a year of carbon dioxide flowing through our living spaceship Earth. And you'll see like the red is the emissions going off every winter. And then there's this huge drawdown that happens just about now in July, with all the carbon dioxide that comes in through all of the blooming photosynthesis in the Northern Hemisphere, where most of our land mass is. We have this great big inhale that happens every year. And so if we can just enhance and support nature's ability to regulate our systems, including the carbon cycle, we can actually have a huge drawdown, an overall drawdown. So we've been going up and up and up in terms of how much carbon dioxide is in the atmosphere and other greenhouse gases. And in 20 years, we actually could see that peak and begin to draw down again. That's like best case scenario. The latest drawdown numbers that we did in Drawdown Review, Drawdown 2.0, says that by 2043, we could draw down. And that means temperatures would go down about 10 years later. So 2053, we could peak at 1.526 degrees centigrade above pre-industrial levels. And so it's even best case scenario, we're going to have kind of what I call the awkward era of, you know, this good news is getting better and bad news is getting worse. And, you know, we're seeing all these beautiful projects, you know, planting agroforestry systems with agriculture and trees, and, you know, creating medicinal plants, and, you know, helping people just see all the traditional ecological knowledge of the indigenous communities, and upholding that, all while balancing the carbon cycle, increasing our livelihood, you know, helping us heal. And yeah, that's beautiful. And also in that awkward era, we're still going to have extreme weather events, and we're still going to have like the economic and food insecurity and political insecurity that you know are the knock-on effects of those extreme weather events. And so we have to kind of like brace ourselves a bit that it can be temporary, and not get you know, not shift into apathy. Like, there is definitely grieving to do. We are going to lose some ecosystems. We're likely to lose a lot of coral, almost all of it. We'll have to replant and regenerate it, but you know, natural existing living coral is not going to probably be a thing of the future. But like, knowing that it's temporary and knowing we have the potential to regenerate it can fuel us. And actually, like, the grieving can get you to appreciate what we do have and the opportunity that we do have to still turn things around. But if you let the grief get into apathy, like, we just don't have time for that. So that's one thing I continuously just like watch out for. If people are getting into apathetic modes or overly cynical modes, it's something we need to bring them back from.
Yeah, and let's go back to the original topic. You know, this wealth disparity. You know, like what needs to happen with that? I can just hear the mega wealthy saying, "Well, all I did was build a business that you know, produced this wealth. I didn't do anything wrong. I didn't seek to harm anybody in this process. I just happened to be the right person in the right time, and I did the hard work to build this business.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what kind of shift do we need to see in that? I think you made some mentions of it earlier, but let's just kind of run through some of the things that we really need to see from that, 1% of 1% on the planet.
Yeah, I think we all need to be comfortable with the idea of reparations, and basically go through some sort of global truth and reconciliation process. That's not blaming any person in particular, but blaming the dynamics at hand. So there's kind of underlying, meta narratives that have pushed our economy to work in certain ways, have pushed us to just look at quarterly profits above almost everything else. And it's like a story of separation, as Charles Eisenstein says. There are these kind of just, meta narratives that have led us to extract and degenerate the entire planet. And so acknowledging that and seeing the root causes of what's happening right now, and two, the downstream effects of, the second and third order effects of all of our actions, we'll be able to see the larger context. And like I started with, like, get comfortable with the idea of reparations and shifting a lot of wealth into the hands of the people who have been, just so effed over for way too long.
Systemic.
And just systemically, there's, like I mentioned earlier, just all the state-sponsored violence in this country is just atrocious. I cannot believe it's still happening. I'm really happy that this movement, it's a long time coming, and I'm really happy with all that has changed in the last month.
And so in order to those kinds of things to happen, it seems like there needs to be some kind of shift in governance, and then obviously some application of a new economic theory, a new economic model. Do you have any thoughts about that? Like, I know there's been a lot of movements to, give, ecosystems and watersheds rights. Is that enough, or do we actually need to go a lot further in terms of our understanding of what in economics we call resources, whether it be human or natural resources, and our understanding of how maybe humanity ought to deploy and collectively manage those resources? Do we need to go back to the drawing board, to the very basis of what it means to exchange value with human beings, or is there something savable about the current system?
Yeah, I think a lot of it needs to be hospiced, and some of it can be composted. So, the idea of Buckminster Fuller talked about wealth, the true meaning of wealth being the total know-how of all of humanity to take care of itself, and ultimately to achieve a higher standard of living than any of us can imagine.
Right.
And if we can shift our understanding of that being wealth, it's again back to the kind of the meta narrative level of, the paradigm shift level of what needs to happen, then, if we can get enough people to kind of grok that, it shifts how we are making decisions and what makes sense. And the other piece is just identifying humans ourselves. We tend to think of ourselves as kind of like a cancer, just totally focused on growth, singular focus. When really we have this ability to be apex healers rather than apex predators within our environment, these keystone species that can create soil. I mean, much of the Amazon was planted by people, and that soil was built by people adding charcoal and ceramics and fish bones, and, some of that soil still grows 3 inches a year. Like, we have this ability. And so I think, part of it is what we're working on with the Buckminster Fuller Institute now is this project called Regenerosity. And the idea is to get bold, generous gifts from philanthropy and put it directly into the hands of the people who are doing some of the planet's most critical work, protecting these bioregions and increasing the livelihood of their communities. And in some cases doing, blue carbon, putting carbon back into ocean ecosystems in, major ways, and enabling just so much health. And so I think some of it can happen without changing the entire economic structure, but just by getting to, have generous gifts and have foundations and others spend down their money while we still have a chance.
Great. Yes. I like that. I'm going to just, bookmark that, spend down as an idea, being able to reinvest our resources into projects that restore the earth. I think is an amazing concept. I really want our viewers to hold on to that. Even if you don't have a lot to give, you always have something to give, whether it's your time or your money to these efforts, whether it be on a global level, like working in the Amazon, helping out with people like Amazon Watch and Tulsa Satani, who has been on the show and is part of the World Unity Week. And also looking at like, how can I give of my time? Like my life is a resource, and what it can be focused on and put towards is pretty much unlimited. You can use your imagination and think of all kinds of ways you might be able to impact things globally and locally. We just need to get freed up a little bit from that. And then, of course, like right now, we're all cussed adrift from the dominant economic system anyway. Many of us don't have income, and so we're spending all of our time worrying about how we're going to survive inside the broken system. How about some time to be imaginative and just imagine, like how you might be able to contribute or make an impact. I think that's really important. And kind of as far as, like looking forward to the next, year or so, what are some of the things that you would like to see people do? Obviously activism's big right now, but what are some of the things that you think, now that we've kind of had this wake up call and this shock, that we could start to do that would help to create the willpower to make the changes that we need to make so that we can have that best case future you described?
Yeah. I mean, just first and foremost, make sure that we don't take those best intentions and do something neo-colonial yet again. So stop, listen, evaluate, dismantle your white supremacy, or all the other supremacies that you might hold. Just look around and just think, how often a day do you think you are superior because of one reason or another, because of your education or because you're an artist and someone else isn't, or, just all the different ways that we need to dismantle. So that's first things first. And then from there, the environmental narrative of like, reduce your footprint, is definitely part of what needs to be done. But I also like to encourage people to look at their handprint. What are they uniquely capable of doing? Not just lessening to zero and doing less bad, but what are they designed to do? Each of us are here for, a different unique reason. And Buckminster Fuller talked about, like, look out and try to find the thing that needs to be done that no one's doing and do it. Right. And that which might seem really obvious to you is probably not very obvious to everyone else. But again, don't do it in a neo-colonial way. So watch out and be sure that you're working in partnership with people. If you're going to be working in a place that's not yours, ensure that you're working with someone from that place and really expanding the potential that's already there, rather than coming in with your idea.
We're big proponents of hyperlocalism. So the land and the people of a specific place have the information needed to have that place work for all of them. And we all live in a hyperlocal environment ourselves. We all live in a neighborhood or an area, or maybe multiple areas on the planet, but we have our own hyperlocal environments. I think, if you have this burning desire, this desire to make an impact or get out there and head off something, terribly negative that's going to happen, the desire is really important to pay attention to, and to, really let that passion drive you forward. But the next thing you have to do is you have to come up with ideas to channel that passion. And I think what you mentioned here is probably something that's become, if not more important, certainly mostly more in focus, which is listening. How long can I stay in a state of listening without jumping to a conclusion? Knowing how to do something, or knowing better, which is a hallmark of our supremacy, is actually reject the first 10 of those. Like, I know how to do that, or I can fix that. Reject the first 10, because that's not creativity. That's actually just recycling ideas that have been given to you by culture anyway. And if we continue to repeat the old ideas, all we get is the old results. So listen, think, try with other people. Does this sound like something that could work? Does this sound something that could work? Or find somebody that's already doing something. Project Drawdown would be great to go volunteer and spend time with, or Buckminster Fuller Institute has great amounts of information and things you can learn. But listening is really, really most important, so that the ideas that we come up with, which we're going to take action on, we're going to build organizations or build an initiative or do something, that they actually contain the seeds of the future we want to create. versus the seeds of the past that we do not want in our future to come.
Right.
So anything else that you want to leave us with today, Amanda? I've had such a great time listening to you and learning from you today.
Yeah, I think just, one thing that we can all do is change how we're eating. And there's so many different ripple effects to it, including just how well nourished you are and how healthy you are and how well your immune system is doing, which is really relevant these days. But yeah, we make decisions many times a day about what we're eating. And, if you can grow and be in relationship with the land and soil around you, there's so many beautiful opportunities there, and help other people in your community kind of get into grow your own medicine, whether that's in the form of tea or tinctures. And then supporting at least organic, if not regenerative, local farmers. What are all the farms in your area that you can get to know the farmer's name and resource from them? And yeah, just like consider yourself allergic to pesticides. The world is basically allergic to pesticides. It's ridiculous that we're still completely surrounded by them. 80% of the biomass of insects are gone. We're in the midst of a crazy insect apocalypse, and we're still eating food with insecticides on it. So if you can, consider yourself allergic to all of that and just eat organic, try to eat as local as possible. And you'll feel just more of that will, that energy, that passion to make the world a better place, which is really, I think, one of the most important resources we need to pay attention to. We have the technology, we know how to do this, we have the business models, we know how to listen to traditional ecological knowledge and indigenous people, but it's really like the will and fighting that apathy, and eating well and eating organic can help you do that, or ideally regenerative.
Great. Thank you, Amanda. Thank you for that bit of advice, first of all. And also just thank you for dedicating your life to, first of all, through Bucky's work, a world that works for 100% of life. And then thank you for your dedication with Project Drawdown to actually give us a roadmap or an idea of how we might be able to reverse climate change. Thank you for your service.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, it's totally doable. We got this.
Great. Thank you, listeners, and we'll see you again soon on the Boldly Now Show.
The Boldly Now Show, igniting the world of burning desire, big ideas, and bold action.